Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Stitch Sessions. This week we are working on this sweet little lamb baby blanket, and I was really excited to work on this because I gave it to a dear friend of mine who just had a baby a little while back. And I love working on motifs like this for baby blankets because they're easier to work on in different locations if you want to take your work with you. And we are using the hexagon motif. So you may have noticed in some of our recent tutorials in the last few weeks, I've done things surrounding the hexagon shape, and I showed you how to make the actual little lamb hexagon motif, and most recently the half hexagon. So with all of these little pieces that you've got under your repertoire now, you can put this blanket together. And I was able to deliver it beautifully to the giftee, or the mom-to-be, I should say, and she just loved it. And I'm so excited to share it with you and get you started on this cute little baby blanket. So let's grab all of our materials and let's get stitching. Okay, everyone, so we are going to get started on our little lamb's baby blanket. And as you can see, I did it in a few different colors just to kind of bring it to life a little bit. And I chose to make my lamb out of this really pretty variegated kind of candy tones, I call it, just to make it a little different, but also because I had quite a bit of this yarn lying around and I wanted to use it up. So here's what you're going to need for your blanket. You can make it in a few different colors, just like I did. You can actually just do it in two-tone colors. Like a lot of my motifs were in this lilac and white. So it's completely up to you. I used two of these Caron Simply Soft party yarns, and they come in 85-gram balls. They are a little bit, it says a medium weight 4, but I found it a little bit closer to a 3. It's a very fine weight for a 4. So I used two of these, and then I had a practically just about a full skein of this impeccable yarn, and it comes in 127.5 grams. And just in case you're wondering, the color is called Petunia. Okay, and it was just so super pretty. And then the variegated was something, again, I had tons left over. I don't have the label for this anymore, but I believe this was a Red Heart Super Saver. Okay, you can always make them in any colorway you desire. And for this variegated, I mean, I didn't use much of it because I was just using it for the embellishments around the faces and some of the hexagons. So I think if you got a skein of this, a skein of the lilac, and two of these, you would be a-okay for this project. Okay. Now the hook that I used for this project, I went back and forth between a 5.5 millimeter hook and a 5. Hopefully you can see that there, and a 5.75 millimeter hook. And the only reason why I did that is whenever I was working with the white, which I felt was just a bit finer than the lilac or the red heart, I wanted the stitches to sit somewhat evenly. And by using a larger hook size for the white just helped that yarn sit a little bit more relaxed next to the weight 4, which I found had a bit more bulk, I guess we'll say, to it. If you're an experienced crocheter and you can, relax your stitches when need be, you don't have to do this. But and if you're using all the exact same yarn weight, then you don't have to worry about it at all. But I would say anywhere between a 5.5 all the way up to a 6 you could use for this project, depending on how loosely you'd like your stitches to sit. And of course, as always, you're going to need a handy pair of scissors and a trusty darning needle because you're going to have a lot of ends to sew in this project. So here's how my motif went down. And as you can see, I'm just finishing up the last bits of it. And I used a total of 15 hexagon motifs. and 7 of my little lamb faces, which also I turned into hexagon motifs. So the whole blanket is using our hexagon motif shape, but we all started them all with a circular center. So what we're going to do for this project, and I've still got one to go here because I wanted to take you through with building this. What we're going to do is we're going to go through creating our first original hexagon shape, how to take your circular piece and shape it into a hexagon. And we've already got a tutorial that we've done on this, so we're going to link it in the cards right up there. And we're also going to put a link in the description box down below. The second part you should move on to is creating our little lamb face. Okay, so I'm going to show you here. We used, again, the hexagon motif, but we're going to, before we continue building up to the hexagon, we are going to create the outline of our face along with a little bit of our sheep curls here, I call them, with our ears. Then we'll finish to create the hexagon shaping, and we'll go back and do the face. So first thing you need to do all of your hexagon motif pieces, then move on to your lamb faces, which we have also done a tutorial on this already. So we're going to also link that in the cards right up there, as well as in the description box down below. Now, you can start with your face and then move on to the hexagon, but I think it might make more sense as you practice crocheting your hexagon shapes. I think having the plain hexagon first will make you more comfortable for when it comes to adding the little face on there. That's just my suggestion. Once you've got all of your pieces, so we need 15 of these regular hexagons and then 7 of these with the face, then we just have a few more pieces to work, and that is our half hexagon shapes, because we will have a few gaps here on the sides that we'll need to fill. So we also did a tutorial on that. And the reason why we did separate tutorials is it will make it quicker for you if you ever in future would like to reference these projects for other projects. Like maybe you'd like to do a scarf in the future, or a pillow, or a hat. That way it just makes it much quicker for you to reference, okay? So we've also got a tutorial on the half hexagon shape. And there's a link for it right there as well. And absolutely down in the cards, and absolutely down in the description box below to make it a little bit easier. So once you have all of those pieces done, then meet me back here and I'm going to show you how we are going to sew all of our pieces together to create our beautiful baby blanket. Oops, and one more thing I forgot to mention is the width, because I know you guys are going to ask me that. So I did my faces, by the way, facing in all different directions, just so in case you're wondering how, what is right side up and right side down. And I did that in this particular project so that no matter which way you turn the blanket, it was always going to be kind of the right side. So obviously your center one is going to be facing a particular way, but on each side I made the faces facing outwards. So see those down below, the face is that way, and this one down below, the faces are more towards us. So that was just my preference. You can make them all facing the same way, totally up to you. So the width so far, now keep in mind, I have not put the border on yet because I'm going to do that with you guys, okay? So the width from the furthest point here to the furthest point there, I have 23.5 inches across, and the length from flat side to flat side is 26 inches. So 23 inches in width, 23.5, and 26 in length. So probably once we add a border on here, this will probably end up being about 25 inches across, and probably about 27, maybe 27.5 in length. This is meant for a baby, so that's usually a good width and length. This can also be used as a car seat blanket. And I mean, you can make yours as large as you want, by the way. I mean, you know, you can always customize your projects to whatever you like. But I know some people just like following the projects I do exactly as a replica. So just a heads up, those are the measurements for the blanket. And this blanket is being made for a 3-month-old. So I think that they will be just fine with this size. Okay, so go ahead and get all of your pieces done, and then we're going to meet up here and we're going to talk about how we're going to sew all of our pieces together for our blanket. All right, guys, so let's talk about sewing our pieces together. And I've got one more piece here that I'm going to place in the final spot for my blanket. And I'm going to go through that with you, but I'm going to explain kind of my method on putting all these pieces together. So what you want to do is take all of your pieces and lay them flat in the configuration that you would like them in. So I changed colors sometimes. So I did sometimes the lilac on the outside with the white in the center, or I did the white on the outside, and then I added a few other things. So these are all hexagon shapes in a couple of different color combinations. So I played around with how I wanted them laid out. And what I did is I went corner to corner the same, and then this corner and that corner were the same. And then I just kind of played with, I had quite a few of these lilac ones. So you can see I used them. They were the more dominant colorway here. So just to give you an idea of how I put my blanket together. Again, if you're doing yours all in one color, then you don't even have to worry about it. But the main thing is to lay it all flat and kind of connect them in the way you'd like to have them assembled. So the easiest thing to do then is take it row by row and sew all the sides together. So I'm just going to take this as an example. So I know that this is all one row. So what I would do is I would sew this side, then I'd go here and separately sew this side and this side and this side. Then I would go to the row next to it and put all my pieces in line, and I would do the same thing here. So I'd sew all the short pieces first. Once I've got all of my stuff done in rows, I would then go back and start sewing the rows to each other. So then I would come here and I would sew along the edges here to connect them. Okay. Now that in fact is not how I work this project because I'm just funny that way. But I'm explaining to you this way because that is probably the most straightforward, easy way to do it and to visually have it make sense to you, especially if you are a beginner. Now, me, because I like to not have to snip my yarn a lot, I basically started with my first couple of pieces and I would just attach my pieces as I would go. So here I attached here, and then I went here, and then I attached here. So I just kind of, so then sometimes they had gaps, and then I would go back and re-sew them as well. So don't worry if that made absolutely no sense to you. It's my own method. I would strongly recommend you doing what I explained at the beginning because it's the most straightforward way. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how I did the sewing, the technique I used, which is just a simple whip stitch in the outside loop. So that's what I'm going to show you right now. So a little something about sewing. What you want to do is you want to take a strand of yarn that is going to make it to the other side. So what do I mean by that? So when you start doing things like sewing your rows, it isn't enough. So let's say I'm sewing this edge here. It really isn't enough to cut a piece that fits exactly that, because what's going to happen as you sew is your yarn does need room to coil. And so this length, although stretched out, reaches here, will not make it. So as a gauge, I always say do 3 times the length of the project that you're sewing. Sometimes I would even do 4 times the length, depending on what kind of give your yarn has. So in this case, I'm going to sew this final piece in. I'm going to show you guys how I'm going to do it. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. So you could just kind of loosely take yarn and come around the 4 sides just like that. And then I actually went back again a second time, and then a little bit of a third. So I'm hoping that that's going to be enough for me. And I say hoping because sometimes you think you've got plenty and it can run out. In any case, let's get this going. We are going to feed our yarn through our darning needle to begin. Okay, and so your work is currently right side facing out on both parts. So I'm going to start with this side here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it so that, oh, look at that, I still have to weave in my tails. I'm going to flip it so that the right sides are facing each other. And then I'm going to work from here. So the main thing is to start in the same stitch. So I am going to find the chain 1 space, which is right here. And I am going to find the back loop of the first stitch, which is right there. Okay. So the back loop is the loop furthest away from me. Now, this piece that I have here against there, I'm going to find the same spot. So there's the chain 1 space from the previous round, and I need to find the chain 1 space of the single crochets, which is showing up right here. So I'm going to insert into the front loop. So this is the loop that's closest to me. Hopefully you guys can see that. See, the back loop is there. This is the front loop. Okay, so I'm just going to take my yarn needle and insert it through there. So what do we have here? I'm going to insert through the back loop of the piece of work that's furthest away from me, and then into the front loop of the piece of work that's closest to me. Okay, so then I'm just going to feed that through just before I get to the end. And then what you want to do is you want to knot your work. So that just secures it there. Okay, then I just do that. Just like that. And then I'll just kind of sew over that tail. Now I've secured my corners. I'm going to just go all the way to the end, and my stitches should equal out. Because remember, our motifs all have the same number of stitches. So now I'm going to find the next stitch, which is right here, and that is the back loop. And now I'm going to match up into the very next stitch, the front loop here. Okay, and I'm just going to do a whip stitch. Just nice and gentle, pulling that there. Okay, and then I'm just going to hold that down so I can work over it. And the next stitch I'm going to go into is right there. That's the back loop. And then I am going to go into the front loop of the next stitch. And I just wanted to kind of hold that down so I can sew over it. Or you can always weave it in at the end. I always try and see if I can sew over my ends as I go, just like that. So you want to pull it snug, but not too tight. You don't want your work to pucker. And that's what you're going to do all the way to the end. So back loop and front loop. And for me, I always work from the back towards me. That's just how I like to whip stitch. Some people do it the opposite way. Whatever works for you. There we go. Okay, so again, the back loop. Match it up with the very next stitch is the front loop. Okay, so you're going to do that all the way until we hit the corner. Okay, so I've come up to my corner, and my corners are where I say you're going to receive the most forgiveness, so to speak. So if I turn my work, you can see now that by working into the loops, have created again this really beautiful, lovely ridge work in the blanket, and I just love that effect. So the corners are very forgiving because sometimes, let's say you got to the corner and maybe you're one stitch less here, one stitch more there. You can always work into a few different loops to snuggle that corner in. So the next thing we want to do is work through the corner and then come across around the other side. And the technique will be the same. So I flipped it this way, but only because I'm going to keep working another, maybe one more stitch to just, because now I'm coming up to my chain 1 or the single crochet in the corner there. So back loop, and then my next stitch here, which see, it's now in a corner, so it can get a little bit foggy on where to go, but I'm going to go right there. Just like that. And now I just like to kind of flip it back and forth. So I can see now I am heading nicely into that corner. So what I want to do now is I am going to take my work, so it's right side up again, and now I'm going to flip it this way because now I'm coming around a new side. So then I would just continue to find my back loop and see the next stitch there because we're now around a new side. So that's the last one I worked is right there. So I think that's going to work out pretty good. So I'm going to whip stitch there. Whoops. My yarn attacked my camera. Just like that. And then the next stitch next to that is this one right here and this one. Whoops, lost my needle there. Okay, and after I've done a couple, I just want to turn it flat again and see how I'm doing. Okay, that's coming out okay. So beautiful. So I just came around the corner pretty okay. And that's what you're going to do. So the technique is now the same. You've seen me whip stitch the other side. Sorry, my camera's just going crazy with the light right now. So I'm going to whip stitch here. When I get to the corner, then I'm going to flip it to the final side here, which will be right here. And that should take me to the end of my blanket. And then I'm going to snip my yarn. And I am done. All of my motifs should sit flat like that. And so go ahead and do that. And I'll meet you back here. All right, guys, I've reached my final loop. And I've just done an extra little knot at the end. And sometimes I will just go back and forth in here. Just a few times to secure again. And then I'll snip my yarn and I'll leave a little tail because then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work over that when we do our border. So now you can see that our motif is now sewn in nicely and all of our pieces are together. So we are now in the home stretch. Now some people might opt to block their project first, maybe before doing a border. I would say do whatever's comfortable for you. If you feel like it would sit nicer for you to then crochet the border on it, go for it. I think I'm just going to go ahead and do my border and then block it all afterwards so that all the fibers are kind of where they need to be all together. So that is our next section here. So right now our work looks like this. We've got all of our hexagon pieces and our sides are filled in nicely. So you can see that the side edges there will have the little kind of peaked border, and that's a-okay. And then we're going to have a flat side. But we are going to do a pretty little fan shell border around this, which will soften up some of these points and edges. So that is the next section we're going to work on next. So let's get started on our final journey to finishing our little lamb's blanket. Guys, we are in the final stretch of finishing our blanket. So we've sewn in all of our motifs. So our blanket is looking like this. I just love how this turned out. So you're going to have a straight edge and then you're going to have a pointed edge. And our border will work just perfectly whether or not you're going along a straight edge or a peaked edge. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to start working along our pointed edge here. And I have decided to just continue on in the white for my border. So that is what we're going to start with. And we're going to begin with a slip knot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my very first corner here. So this would be along the flat side. And I'm going to find that chain one space, which is right there. And I'm going to insert my hook. Oops. I'm going to slip stitch to join. Oops. Make sure you don't lose your loop. And now I'm going to chain 3. This will count as a double crochet. Now we're going to go back into the same stitch and we're going to do a double crochet 2 more times. So there's 1, and I'll go back in there, and there is 2. Okay, so you have something like this. So it's basically a shell. Just leave that tail there to weave in afterwards. Now what we're going to do is we're going to skip the next 2 stitches. So we have 1, 2, and into the 3rd stitch, we're just going to do a single crochet. Okay, so you're going to have something that looks a little like that. Then we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, and into the 3rd stitch, we're now going to do 5 double crochets all into that stitch. Okay, so there's 1 and 2. 4, whoops, and 5. Okay, so now you've got something that looks more like a fan. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to skip the next 2 stitches, which is 1, 2. That might be 1 because it looks like that's where we joined. Essentially, you want to end up in another corner. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to find that corner space and we're going to single crochet. Okay, so you've got something that looks like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to find the next, we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, and into the 3rd, we're going to do that fan stitch again, or an extended shell. So that means it's going to be 5 double crochets. And this is basically going to be the pattern for our border. Okay, and I like to keep them nice and relaxed. So this is the 4th, and this is the 5th. Okay, so you can see how it's fanning nicely. And in a way, it helps to soften these points here. So I will skip the next 2 stitches, and in the 3rd, I will single crochet. So the single crochets that flank these fans just help them sit really nicely, just like that. Okay, so now we're coming up to a dip. So a dip of our points, so to speak. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we are going to move up to using triple crochet stitches. So there's my end right there. Okay, so we are going to yarn over 2 times, and we're going to find a spot where we feel it sits right in the center, where we kind of attach these 2 hexagons together. So for me, that looks like it's going to be somewhere right there. Okay, so I'm going to insert and I'm going to work a triple crochet. So that means I'm going to pull through the first 2 loops only. I'll have 3 left. I'll pull through the next 2 loops and then I'll pull through the next 2. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. There's a big gap here. Don't panic. Only I'll have 3 left. I'll pull through the next 2 loops and then I'll pull through the next 2. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. There's a big gap here. Don't panic. We are going to do 4 more of these into the same space or into the same spot. Okay, so there's 2. So remember, you have to yarn over 2 times and into that same space, or stitch I should say. Pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, and we're going to do 2 more. Yarn over 2 times, and then pull through the first 2, the second 2. Oh, let's not forget that one. And then we've got 1 more. We yarn over twice, insert into that stitch, yarn over to pull through. So you're going to have 4 loops on your hook. You'll yarn over to pull through the first 2, yarn over to pull through the second 2, and yarn over to pull through the third. Okay, so you see what happens there? I'm just going to lay this down here. So here now you can see that it kind of just helps to fill that gap in there. Okay, and I'm going to leave it up to you. Like, I am probably actually going to do 7. I'm going to do 2 more because see, it depends on how it sits when you lay it flat. Like for me, that looks like it's not quite enough. So I'm going to do 2 more of these. And as you can tell, a lot of times it's experimentation as I go along. So I'm going to go back into that same space or that spot where I was. Whoops. So this is my 6th one. Whoops. And I'm going to do 1 more. I'm going to do a 7th. I find that things that sit in odd numbers just have a nice symmetrical look. So that's 7. And I think I'm a lot happier with that, how that looks, because it fills that space nicely. So then what I would do is I'm going to now skip the next 2 stitches, and into the 3rd I'm going to single crochet, and that's going to anchor down that fan. See that? Beautiful. So then I will continue on this formula, I like to call it, as we've been doing. You're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and into the 3rd you're now going to work your usual 5 double crochet fan or shell, however you want to call it. So a lot of times they're used interchangeably. Okay, and then once you've got your 5, you're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and into the 3rd you're going to single crochet. Okay, and now we come up to a peak here, so we're going to skip 2, and guess what? We're right into that space. So we're going to work 5 double crochets. Now sometimes you're going to notice, like back here the last time we were in a peak, the peak ended up being a single crochet. In this case, the peak is going to be a shell. So, and that is a-okay. Okay, then I'm going to skip 2 again. I'm going to single crochet. Sorry guys, once you start working a larger project, it gets awkward to film. Okay, and then I'm going to skip the next 2, and then I'm going to do another shell or fan into that. So I'll do my 5. So there's 3, 4, Okay, then I'm going to skip the next two, 1, 2, and the third one would be a single crochet. Now because I've got my space here, I'm just going to go right into that corner space to do the single crochet. Okay, it's just because my sides of each side now have 11 stitches, so that's why the 5 counts will shift a little bit, but it all works out. So now we're back down to our dip, and I'm going to do this one more with you, and then I'm going to set you loose. So I am going to work 7 triple crochets into this little dip here, and I'm going to work it in somewhere in between where I sewed these 2 motifs together. So again, I'm going to yarn over 2 times. I'm going to find a spot that I like, so right there. I'm going to pull through 2, pull through 2 more, pull through the next 2. Okay, so I'm going to do that for a total of 7 times every time I have a dip in my motifs. So I've done my 7 triple crochets, and now I'm going to skip the next 2 stitches and single crochet in there. Okay, so I think now you're getting the gist of this. It's kind of big to throw around here. So just to show you the effect, so see we've got our triple crochet fans in the dip, and it just kind of, because you have to go down deeper, the triple crochets, the height kind of just helps to bring everything up to kind of par with the others. Okay, so you've got some shells that sit on the side. Sometimes the shells come right around the top, and that is a-okay. So then we've just done our last set of 7 triple crochets, and that's how we're going to continue on. So you might wonder, like, how come at the beginning we only did 3? Because this is technically considered half of a shell. So once you come all the way around and you're coming back up, you'll then work the last 2 double crochets into that corner and finish off our border just beautifully. Okay, so I'm going to set you loose to do that. You're just doing shells of 5 until you get into the dip, and then you're going to do shells of 7 triple crochets. You're always going to skip 2 and flank it with a single crochet. Once you get to your flat side, you will continue on with the same pattern. So you're just going to do your typical shell, skip 2, single crochet, shell, skip 2, single crochet. Okay, so it'll be the same on the straight side as it is here. It's just here you're going to notice it's going to do a little bit of this. On the straight side, you're going to have your straight edge, and then your scallops will just go along there. Okay, but you know what I'll do? Go ahead and finish this little peaked side here, this first side. Then I'll meet you at the top of the straight edge, and then I'll take you guys through that, just the first one around there, just so you get a feel for it, okay? Okay, so I got a little excited here, and I've already done 3 sides of my blanket. So I've got, that one has the pointed edges there where you can see. And then I came around down my straight side, and that is basically the effect. So you still have this lovely little scalloping edging going on here. Sorry, I can't get it all in the shot. And so I just came around the bend here, around the straight edge, which now just creates a really pretty little scallop. Came around the corner, and hopefully you can see where the shell stitches sit, and then came around the other side again. And now I'm just coming up to the last quote-unquote flat side. I'm just going to pick that up there so you can see. So see how sometimes when we're doing half hexagon, we just sometimes get a bit of a bumpy edge? That should all kind of blend in once we do our little shell stitches along the side, and then we are done. And some people might opt to do another row, another round around the blanket, depending on how thick you'd like your border to be. Some people might even do one more row of like a single crochet just to really finish it off. But I'm pretty happy with the way it is. So I am just going to quickly take you through how to go around the flat side, just so you can get a better feel for it. The stitch count and everything is the same as we've been working on so far. So I just came around my little peak here, and we're about to start the straight edge of our blanket. So I've just done a single crochet. So what I'm going to do is just continue on my pattern as usual, skipping 2 stitches, 1, 2, and into the third, we're going to do a shell of 5 double crochets. Exactly how we were doing along the peaked edges. Sometimes it's nice to see how it actually turns out along a straight side. So I have 3, I'm going to do 4, and then 5. So this is all into the same stitch. And so technically I've worked out of a corner here. It was a little offset just because of the, it was a little offset just based on the stitch count, but no worries. So now I'm going to skip 2 again. So I have 1, 2, and into the third, I'm going to do my single crochet to anchor down that fan. And there you have it. So we've come around the corner, so to speak, and now we're just going to go along the flat edge, and I'm going to do one more with you. And at this point, I think after doing a few of these, you should get good practice at creating these shells. So we've just worked out of this one. Now we're going to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and into this third one, we will do our 5 double crochet stitches, which will create our shell. Now a little something here. If you find that working 5 double crochets is a bit snug, or you find that it's causing your edges to curl or buckle, you may need or want to do 6 double crochets so that that shell will sit a little flatter. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Because this is a border, you've got a lot of creative license here. So this is 5, but see, if I pull down too much, depending on your yarn, it may buckle the project. So you could, if you wanted to, do 6. So I'm going to do a 6th one here to show you. See, so what happens is the more you do in that stitch, the more relaxed and flat that project will stay. So now if I did a single crochet, it still looks just fine. Okay, but I'm going to leave that up to you. I am going to keep mine to 5 because it's been working pretty nicely for me. Okay, so then skip 2 and into the third, we are going to, that looks like a spot where I may have joined, slip stitch to join. So sometimes you got to get creative with inserting your hook. So, and single crochet. Okay, so now we're working along straight edge. So I'm going to do one more because now we're going into the half. Wish my lighting would. Okay, so we are now going to skip the next 2, 1, 2, and as always, just insert and do your shell. And I've been working 5. You may need 6. You may even need 7. You see, if you are a tight stitcher, or whoops, if you're a tight crocheter, then you'll most likely need more double crochets in your shell. Okay, so I've done my 5. I'm going to skip 2, and in the third, I'm going to single crochet. Okay, so now I came along my peaked edge, and now we're just working across a straight edge. So your work will look like that. And that's it. You're going to do that on both of your straight sides. And then I'm just going to meet up with you when we get to the end here and ready to finish off our blanket. And here we are at the end of our border. So I've just done my last shell, and guess what? I have 1, 2, and actually 3 stitches left. And guess what? Not going to worry about it at all. So what I'm going to do is I am going to skip the 2 as usual. I'm going to single crochet. Okay, so I still have that gap there, and I'm not going to worry about it because remember we had this half shell here. We're just going to go directly into that and put 2 double crochets in here. So at the beginning, when we first started our blanket, we did a chain 3 and then 2 double crochets. So that's half of our shell. Remember, the chain 3 counts as 1. So I'm just going to go right back into that same space, and I'm going to do 2 double crochets. Okay, and now I'm just going to slip stitch to the top of our chain 3, which is right there. Oops. Just like that. See how beautifully that blends in? And you've just finished off your blanket. And for some reason, I have misplaced my scissors. So you would snip off your yarn. And let's just get a better view here. And that is it, gang. That is your Little Lambs blanket. The border is finished. Again, you can make your border as thick as you like with our little lambs there, little lambs, and our hexagon motif. And this has been so fun to make, and I actually am super excited about giving it to the mom of this little one I'm making it for. I hope she'll really like it. And it's just always fun to create things with a little motif in it. So if you guys have any questions at all about the process or about putting these motifs together, make sure to drop me a comment in the comment box, or you can always reach me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And you can also always find me on Instagram. We are at The Stitch Sessions, and that's a perfect place for you to tag me on any of the projects that you've made using our tutorials. I'd love to see it. And if you haven't already pressed that subscribe button, make sure you do so you never miss any of our stitch session tutorials or crochet conversations. We upload our videos every Wednesday, and you might want to click that notification bell as well, so that way you'll get informed as soon as we go live. So in the meantime, everyone, have an amazing day. Happy crocheting and take care.